Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Now, of course, Tumelo Madlala, who was in the house in Vosloorus when his friend Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed, claims he recognizes a man in the dock as one of the intruders. This after a question from the state, but the defense has objected to this line of questioning. It says the state has not laid a basis for it. Madlala is also expected to produce his flight ticket for questions during cross-examination. eNCA reporter Slindelo Masikane, of course, has more on this particular trial. She's been following procedure for us. Slee, today quite dramatic with Bongani Ntanzi being pointed out as the man who pinned Senzo Meyiwa down. So this is the first time, I guess, we're seeing the state try and put these 5 men on the crime scene.
Certainly so, but before we get there, we began a little bit late, about 30 minutes late, because a face that we haven't seen for some time now actually made a surprise appearance in court. At about 10:15, Advocate Malisala Tefo, who had quit the case a couple of weeks ago, just came in, started getting dressed in his robes, and I mean, everybody in the courtroom was kind of surprised. Even counsel didn't know what to do. We were all kind of confused. We all just kind of took out our phones and started filming, but didn't understand exactly what he's doing here. When court was then due to start, we started seeing many police officers then making their way to the judges' chambers, and this was when Tefo had made his way to the judges' chambers. And it seems during a caucus with counsel, Tefo had made a request to have all counsel go and see the judge, but counsel did not actually understand why he was here in the first place, so then they refused. So when the judge walked in, he simply really just proceeded with the trial. And of course, Tumelo Madlala then began continuing with his testimony, which is when, of course, we had that dramatic moment, like you said, where he pointed out Bongani Ntanzi, accused number 2, as being the intruder, the second intruder who was pinned against the wall by Senzo Meyiwa during that incident. But something I picked up, Masoko, was that the facial description or the sketch that was shown in court, where Madlala was identifying the first intruder, he gave the description of the first intruder and said that the sketch was of the first intruder. However, today when he comes to court, he points out Bongani Ntanzi, who he'd never described except for saying that the second intruder was tall. So that was the only description we got of the second intruder. And today he then points out Bongani Ntanzi as being the one who was pinned against the wall by Senzo Meyiwa. Of course, the defense objecting, but leaving that, saying that they will argue the credibility or the weight that the court can actually put on this doc identification. Mind you, what the state did isn't wrong of any sort. It is in law. They can do that. It's just that the court will then decide whether there's any credibility to that identification once arguments are done and before the verdict is actually handed down. So that is where we've actually ended, but the state in fact has finished with leading their evidence in chief. When we resume after this tea break, we then will hear from the defense, in particular Titi Tobane, begin his cross-examination. You mentioned that flight ticket that was requested. That was a request from Titi Tobane, who said that he had questions around it because there are issues or speculations around when Tumelo Madlala actually arrived. Because you would remember on Monday we adjourned because we heard that his flight was only due that afternoon, but it doesn't seem like the defense actually believes this and wants Madlala to produce that flight ticket to actually corroborate whether in fact he arrived Monday afternoon or whether perhaps he's been in Gauteng much longer than that.
That's going to be quite interesting, and it's going to be interesting to hear from Titi Tobane, Slee, because he actually also represents accused number 2, right, Bongani Ntanzi, who has now been put on the scene by Tumelo Madlala. But Slee, there was also a back and forth between the two defense lawyers, the state as well as Judge Maumela, regarding a Zulu phrase that Madlala used. He says "sazphuzile," and of course the defense now are they trying to say that he was too drunk to know what he's to have remembered anything?
I think that's the inference they want the court to make in terms of the fact that there was alcohol cans that were found at the scene. The pictures that we've been shown in court show 2 alcohol cans, and Madlala seems to remember exactly what everyone was drinking on that evening. But I think the issues that really do arise from court and court proceedings, especially when there is a different language involved, is the mere fact that interpretation is different. The way we understand our languages are different, and there can be various meanings for one phrase. So if for me says "Bespuzile" means we were drunk, for somebody else it might mean we were just drinking. So it really will be down to the court's understanding in terms of Madlala's explanation, because he clarified and said, what I mean is that we were drinking. I don't mean that we were drunk. I mean, we had a couple of cans of alcohol, but he says that he was very much aware of what was going on and was able to, in fact, assist those who were trying to save Meyiwa's life by putting him in the car and rushing him to hospital.
All right, Slindelo Masikane, with that report, I know the tea break is quite short, so I'll give you a moment to be able to make your way back into that courtroom.